Are you looking to grow your dental practice and attract top-tier new patients? Discover the potential of digital marketing with a personalized strategy session. Join Lila Stone, the marketing director at Equa, for an exclusive 90-minute consultation. Lila and her team will dedicate 6 hours before your meeting to create a customized marketing plan specifically for your practice. This valuable opportunity is free of charge and comes with no commitments. Visit www.insuranceuntangledorg/MSM to schedule your meeting with Lila today. You'll also receive a free analysis report so you can start transforming your practice through the power of digital marketing.
You are now listening to another episode of the Insurance Untangled Podcast, where we explore the various challenges faced by dental practices due to their reliance on insurance. Join us in this podcast as we dive deep into the issues surrounding dental insurance dependence and offer practical solutions and strategies to help you take control of your practice's financial future.
Most practice owners think growth comes from working harder, seeing more patients, or adding another chair. But the dentists who actually scale know it comes from understanding a simple equation and fixing the leaks that they didn't even realize were there. Welcome back to the Insurance Untangled Podcast, where we help dentists turn insurance struggles into growth opportunities by breaking free from PPO limits.
Yeah, Don, great to be with you today. My name is Perrin Desportes. I'm the founder of an executive coaching program called Next Level Executive. And it's a program and a company. I'm an army of one and an HR department of none, as I like to say. But it's a program that's built off of 3 decades worth of experience. I spent 15 years running 3 different businesses for Patterson Dental Supply. So I learned what it was like to be a very young executive in a publicly traded company, had a very successful start to my career at Patterson, and transitioned out of that at the end of 2016 to launch a startup venture with a couple of industry colleagues, a venture called Tusk Partners in January of 17. Tusk was a company that focused consulting services, partnership services, and sell-side services for emerging group dental practices. And you can think about the period of consolidation and those who are building group practices to exit group practices. We found ourselves at the focal point of that. A partner and I left Tusk in March of 21 to launch another firm called Polaris Healthcare Partners, which basically did the same thing over about the last 4 years. And then I rolled out of Polaris at the very end of 2024 to launch Next Level Executive. I'm 55 years old, and candidly, I was tired of the travel and was looking for a way to de-stress part of my life, which I'm sure that a lot of your audience can empathize with. And Next Level Executive has been massively rewarding. I focus my work in the emerging group practice space for those dentists who want to build a business that's a complement or is congruent with their life and not cannibalize themselves in the process. So I get to focus on leadership, partnership, growth strategy, and a lot of things that are really based off of my almost 30 years of experience
In life. So for today, we're going to break down the math behind the real sustainable revenue growth, the benchmarks every owner should be tracking, and what to do when growth may feel a bit sticky. Now, this episode is brought to you by Equa Marketing, the digital growth partner behind this podcast and a trusted resource for dental practices looking to break free from PPOs. So with that being said, let's get into our conversation here, Perrin. So let's start us off. You've broken down revenue growth into a very simple equation: opportunities, conversion percentage, and average treatment value. Can you walk us through each lever and where most practices are leaving money on the table?
Yeah, it's a great place to start, Don. And I think that having worked with so many successful practices and so many emerging groups, people throw revenue numbers around kind of haphazardly, and they're not really connected to how we create that outcome. Sometimes, as entrepreneurs, we're a little bit delusional and we think that, I want the business to grow 10% next year, so that's our growth target, and we're just going to work hard to hit it. You can do that for a little while, but only up to a certain point. And then you really have to get under the hood and figure out how the total revenue number, comes into being. So the way we think about that in any business, whether it's a healthcare services business or a widget factory or anything else, is really off of the opportunities, the prospective customers or prospective patients, the conversion rate, how many of them buy the widget that we're selling or the service that we're offering, and then the average price of the widget or the service itself. And so those three variables, opportunities, conversion rate, and average selling price, are the three pieces of connection in any revenue generating business. Opportunities for our audience today are patients that are really walking into our practice, new patients that are, and they're there for a reason. They responded to an ad or some type of marketing awareness, or maybe it was a referral, and we can get into some of those marketing aspects in a little bit. But they've come to see us for a reason. We treat them, we diagnose them, we do an exam or present something to them in terms of treatment needs, and hopefully all of them accept. Usually not, but a high number of them accept the treatment. And then whatever the average value of the treatment is that we're proposing is the revenue equation. And when you break down those three components, you can influence each and every one of them. And this is really the key point. All right. It's one, academically, we have to understand how revenue is created. The second thing is we have to understand where we can influence it. So when we get to the front end of the equation on opportunities, those are ones that actually walk in the door. But there's a whole lead up to a marketing effort or a referral effort where they reach out to us, and then somebody takes their inquiry and convinces them to come see us. So to get them in the front door, are we doing everything we can to increase the flow, increase the volume of those opportunities? The second piece is, for those who do come to see us, how many of them are trusting us with their healthcare needs? How many of them are saying yes to going forward with whatever the treatment is that we're proposing? And how could we improve that number, that conversion rate? And then the last thing is the average value of the services that we're providing to them. And the usually greater complexity of treatment being offered is usually higher value treatment and can move the needle up in terms of average value. What you find is that if you only focus on one out of every three of those, then you're not really diagnosing and affecting the entire system. You're only affecting a component of it. Ideally, you would like to improve all three of them and get the lift across all three of them for maximum result.
I would like to talk about the second part of increasing the conversion rate, especially like you mentioned, when the patient is through the door and they're on the chair, and then the conversion of the patient acceptance, basically, right? So staff have usually complained that being pushy, being salesy, they really don't want to feel like that car salesman. So how do you increase the conversion percentage without making the patient or staff feel like they're in a high pressure sales environment?
Yeah, I would agree with your sentiments 100%. I as a consumer, I hate being sold. I hate feeling like the only way I can get out of the environment is to acquiesce to whatever the demands are of somebody sharing it with me. How much is it going to cost me to get out of here? That's a terrible way to run a healthcare practice, because those who may say yes, won't be the ones that return very often. And I think the beauty of a dental practice is a high patient retention rate, and we want to keep that in mind. When it comes to case presentation, though, generally speaking, I think there are a couple of things to keep in mind. Patients don't understand dental treatment. I've worked my entire career in the business side of dentistry, and I couldn't tell you how to diagnose anything or what the diagnosis means from an oral healthcare standpoint, and I've lived my life in it. So I'm probably more educated than most. I say that because the first thing is that most clinicians and staff want to present the needs for treatment in an overly complex fashion. And that works against them because patients don't relate to that. They relate to what they can sense and what they can feel and what they attach to emotionally. So the treatment that we're proposing, I'm just going to assume that everyone in your audience believes in their diagnosis, believes in whatever they're proposing to be in the best interest of the long-term oral health of the patient, and they have confidence and conviction about that. So they shouldn't doubt their diagnosis. I don't think that I hope that nobody is presenting treatment that is anything other than in the best interest of the patient. Okay, so given that, how do we share it in a way that the patient can relate to it, can understand it, and can embrace it, that it is in their best, is it in their best long-term interest for their overall health care, not just their oral health care? And we know there's systemic risks and association between oral health and heart health and a lot of other whole body considerations. So there is a compelling reason to present treatment from a credibility standpoint. The last thing I would say is that you and I both know that finances get in the way of treatment being accepted. And I think this is really one where if you present treatment too heavy-handedly, not from an emotional connection to the patient or a true understanding of why this is in their best interest in the long term, the next thing to go off in their mind is, well, how much is this going to cost me? How much am I going to have to pay? This seems like a lot, right? And it very well may be that this is a treatment plan that plays out over a longer period of time, 2 to 3 to 5 years even. And we don't have to pay for it all in this visit. The second thing is having payment plan options, and certainly some aspects of insurance versus full fee of the treatment is important. And really figuring out a way where, if it's in the patient's best interest and their true oral healthcare needs, that we facilitate a way of them making a buying decision to move forward in their best interest and trying to take finances out of it, or at least alleviate the impact as much as possible.
Is it as natural of a skill to actually present things in such a way?
Unless you're dealing with somebody, a presenter who's been, forgive me for putting it this way, trained in sales, I don't think it's natural, because if we are presenting treatment to someone, we are the expert, right? We diagnosed it. We went to school for it. We understand it. We've done this treatment 100 times or more. And it is natural for the presenter to want to overwhelm their audience with facts, figures, complexity, because it elevates us as a presenter. Now, it may elevate us from a business acumen or an educational standpoint or clinical standpoint, certainly, but that doesn't get the patient to say yes. And I think the understanding that people buy with emotion, they justify with logic, is super important. Because when you tell me that whatever you've diagnosed it will improve my smile, let's just be basic about it. People who smile more are more confident. They believe in themselves more. They're generally happier people. These are emotional outcomes for me that I see myself in a different way moving forward. It's transformative to a point on a deeply personal level. And these are the outcomes that I think too many dentists leave an opportunity on the table, candidly. And I think that they want to create the best oral healthcare outcomes for their patients. I mean, that's why they're in the profession. But they don't slow down enough to really understand the emotional outgrowth of it and the transformation that they actually create in most of the patients they treat. And that's I mean, I don't know that there are very many businesses that have a greater why to it than that type of a patient-centric outcome. It's just it's one of the reasons I love the profession so much, but it's almost, I feel like too many of them walk past that outcome because they just accept it as the norm. It's not.
There we go. I appreciate you bringing light to that, Perrin, because I really wanted to know if that's something natural or is it trainable. It's definitely a skill that really needs honing in communication-wise. Now, you also mentioned a benchmark of 20 new patients per full-time doctor per month being a really good number there. Why that number specifically, and what's the real cost of consistently falling below it?
Yeah, I think that when we think about growing revenue in a business overall, we talked about the equation before, but one of the hidden killers in a dentistry business is the lack of patient retention. And look, we have patients that pass away. We have patients that relocate out of our area. We have patients that change dental practices for whatever reason. Or we have patients that just, drop out of the ReCare system and don't call us back until they have a calamity or a need. And when we think about growing revenue, one of the ways to start is really plugging the holes in the bucket. And so patient retention, usually measured on patients seen within the last 18 months, is critically important. And then we work back into the new patients per month per full-time doctor number. It does you no good to be generating 100 new patients a month if you're losing 90 new patients or losing 90 existing patients per month. I mean, that's a race to the end, honestly. So understanding that what you really want in a growing, consistent general dentistry practice is a bare minimum of 20 net new patients per month per full-time doctor. Net being net of those that are lost out of the bottom end of the business. And there are a lot of dashboard applications, software applications like Dental Intel and a bunch of others that track patient retention as well as new patient flows to gain a better handle on this. But the ideal number is probably somewhere between 30 and 40 new patients per month per full-time doctor. And that's for a practice that's still growing and is still growing into its capacity, chairs and days and hours, certainly. And if you're not generating those types of net new patient numbers per full-time doctor, then we need to take a look at, are you already at maximum capacity and you just don't have the ability to add any more days or hours short of like renovating the building or something like that, in which case that's okay. But if you feel like you have gaps in the schedule, if you have further potential of the fixed capacity, then certainly we need to focus on the new patient flows to optimize that number.
Okay. Now you've seen hundreds of P&Ls, maybe thousands even, right? Is there a danger zone number where practice is officially in critical condition?
From a revenue standpoint?
Throughout the whole P&L. What's the number that signifies, all right, we're in critical condition, right?
Yeah. So let's take it from a top line number, because this is one that's easiest to point to, that's frankly or frequently misunderstood. And
okay.
I think that as business owners, we many of us focus on metrics and numbers and benchmarks and outcomes, but we're not really understanding truly the relative points of comparison. Okay. So I'll speak as specifically as I can to this for your audience, and that is the following. I'm not sure the exact number for the inflation rate most recently. It's kind of been all over the board in the United States lately, but let's just take the rate of inflation to be 3%. Okay.
Yeah.
If you're running a business that generates less than 3% top line growth each year, you're not even keeping pace with inflation. Okay. So there's your first number, benchmarked against the rate of inflation. The second part would be the normal growth of the industry you're in. And for the analysts who follow the dental industry in the United States, they are projecting the industry to grow at 4 to 5% on a compounded annual growth rate over the next 3 to 4 years. 4 to 5%. That is net of inflation. It's what's known as a real number. Real means net of inflation. So if the inflation rate is 3% and the industry is forecasted to grow at 4% beyond the rate of inflation, that's a 7% top line number. Now, when we say we want our business to grow at whatever the percentage is per year, it's important to understand rate of growth above rate of inflation and then rate of growth compared to the industry overall. If you are growing your dental practice at less than 7% per year, you're losing market share. You're not keeping up with the average rate of growth of the entire industry. And it's important to understand that because when you're losing market share, this is one of the markers you asked about in terms of underperformance or unrealized potential in the business. If you're building a successful practice or an emerging group, the number is probably close to 8 to 10% on the revenue, on the top line revenue number. And that ensures that you're way out ahead of the rate of inflation. It also ensures that you're growing faster than the industry average. You are taking market share from someone. And that number starts around 8% per year. And for enterprise level DSOs or more successful doctor-led groups, those numbers are typically 12 to 15% per practice organic revenue growth numbers.
Yeah, we might be looking at inflation from, some practices might just be looking at that only. Okay, we are staying ahead of inflation. And the other practices, who got the analysts on board, they're looking at, okay, the dental market is growing 4 to 5% net. And we're doing 6% top line growth year over year. We're not in the clear.
That's right. And once we're more connected to our top line number, even in our annual planning sessions, and we set out a revenue growth number for the business that we want to achieve, and then we think like, okay, well, why did we pick that number? How did we arrive at that number? Did it just sound good, or is there some rhyme or reason behind it? You got to know rate of inflation, organic or industry average, and then what we want to grow ahead of that because we want to take market share. We want to continue to improve the business. And then we think, okay, if the revenue number we have, if the projection we have for the business is 10%, then we get into the things that we started talking about previously, which is how do we get there? How do we influence that number? Is it net new patients per month? Is it conversion rate? Is it average treatment value? Plugging gaps in the schedule and broken appointments and misses and patients who fall out of the recare system. Like, how do we improve the overall business incrementally in a variety of areas that yields the 10% growth number that we set out? That's being connected to the numbers.
I really like that almost a full circle moment there from where we began, because otherwise unfortunately, some practice owners do like to just bring up that number out of thin air, just pluck it out. We're going to grow 10%, but that doesn't have any value or rationality behind it. So really appreciate you breaking down the science behind the numbers. We're going to take a pause here, and regarding that point about the 20 patient benchmark, it's really a great number to hit because while Perrin is giving us the math, actually hitting those numbers requires a strategy that starts before the phone even rings. Growth can still feel inconsistent. Now, that is where Echo Marketing's complementary marketing strategy meeting can be helpful. Think of it as a diagnostic for your practice's growth. For practices owners who want more clarity around growth, you can book your complimentary marketing strategy meeting at insuranceuntangledcom/MSM. I'll repeat that one more time. Insuranceuntangledcom that's one word, .com/MSM. Now, Echo only takes a limited number each month, so it's worth reserving a spot while one is available. Back to Perrin. Now, Perrin, we've talked about getting patients through the door, but let's talk about what happens when they don't show up, right? So, broken appointments and open chair time. You've called these silent killers of practice revenue. How big is the opportunity cost here, and how should owners actually be measuring and fixing it?
I would love to answer the question and say that the opportunity cost is zero and that there is no problem with this anywhere in the industry. But you and I both know that that's not correct. And, again, you have to think of this from a standpoint of maximizing the fixed costs of the business itself. And for, our world, fixed cost is the rent that we pay on the building or the facility every month. To a degree, it's our wages and payroll and all the other normal operating costs in the business, whether we turn the lights on or not. And so when we think of broken appointments or no-shows or just gaps in the schedule, it really is a matter of gap analysis, because all of that open chair time is a wasted opportunity. And it is unbelievably important to focus on the gaps in your business, to try to close the gaps to a degree that is, I would say, reasonable and applicable given whatever the business is. And what you find is that sometimes, I don't want to oversimplify it, but the lowest hanging fruit to pick off of the tree are the opportunities that we're missing in the business itself, versus having to spend more money to struggle to get more new patient opportunities, or expand learn more complicated treatment through continuous CE and everything like that. And this is a scenario where I find that the good practices and good groups have one person typically who's responsible for this. And also they have systems and processes where they're anticipating no-shows or broken appointments or cancellations at the last minute or something like that. And they have the ability to plug patients into that schedule. The other thing is, most often, from a new patient flow standpoint, they understand that that new patients are more likely to show up for an appointment if it's within 48 to 72 hours of the call being answered. So if you tell me, Don, that yes, Perrin, we'd love to have you come in for a new patient visit, and our first opportunity is 4 weeks from now, the likelihood of me showing up for that appointment is all but zero. If you tell me that it's 2 days from now or 3 days from now, then the likelihood of me making that appointment and showing up is much, much higher. So part of it is diagnosing the variance between the verbal commitment and actually walking through the front door in a new patient scenario. For those that reserve new patient times, usually first thing in the morning or around lunch, which are the most highly coveted times for new patients, for those that reserve new patient time on the schedule that for some reason does not get filled, they have a quick call list or a short call list of people who are waiting in the wings for an opening to come in opportunistically when they have a more of an unpredictable work schedule or personal schedule. So there are different ways to look into this. There's certainly better patient confirmation methodology, whether it's text or AI-driven voice calls or emails or all of the above. And, they also tend to track broken appointments or no-shows from a patient standpoint so that they limit the opportunity of those who have a historical pattern of doing this to where they either usher them out of the practice or don't reserve highly coveted times for them. So, there are a number of different ways around it, but certainly the holes in the schedule and the opportunity cost involved with it are a critical point of picking some low-hanging fruit as it relates to revenue generation.
Scheduling coordinators often feel blamed for open chair time that may be out of their control. How can an owner fix this without making it and making the team feel like they're being policed?
I think a lot of it is in the way that the message is delivered from the practice owner or the business leader to those line people who are responsible for whatever it is they're hired to do. And I understand it's a challenge with today's patients, both financially and just from a commitment level, a personal commitment level. But it doesn't change the fact that for broken appointments, misses, and schedules that fall apart, it has an adverse impact on the financial performance of the business overall. And at the end of the day, none of us can afford any misses. This is what I referenced in the beginning about the revenue equation and really understanding how it fits together. And this is another component of it, because if we're spending a lot of money on marketing to create patient demand, and then it falls apart through the retention or the equation of the revenue generation piece, then we're spending money foolishly. And we can only do that for so long. So I'm not saying we need to be perfect. No dental practice is, but there's always the opportunity for progress, and there's always the opportunity for whoever we are and whatever we do for a business, there's an opportunity to get better at our craft. And if it really means something to you, and if the message is delivered in the right way from the business leader, then we've got to be eyes wide open about our continued employment being delivering on that, and being accountable for that aspect of the business for sure.
Okay. Now, if a practice owner listening in and they could only focus on one lever from framework for the next 90 days, perhaps, where would you tell them to start?
I'm going to give you one answer that has two applications. How about that? I'll say the lever or the piece that I would focus most on is conversion rate. And I would focus on conversion rate in two different pieces. One is the phone conversion rate. After we spend money on marketing to make the phone ring, how is the phone being answered? That's the first thing, and that's not a given that it is. So how many new patient inquiries are we actually answering? For the number that we do answer, how many is the phone operator converting? The industry statistics are that only about 7 out of every 10 new patient inquiries get answered on the phone when it rings. Of those that are answered, once again, the average is about 70%. So if you take 0.7 times 0.7, I'm not really good at math, Don, but that comes out to be 0.49. So for all the money we're spending on new patient attraction to make the phone ring, only about 50% of those are actually coming into our practice who responded affirmatively to whatever advertising we're doing. Okay, so this is a really, really big deal in the industry, and it's at the front end of the funnel. And if we can improve that number a little bit, it translates all the way through the revenue equation that we talked about before. So the first piece of conversion would be new patient inquiry and phone conversion specifically. The second would be that treatment case acceptance. After they come in, after we see them, after we diagnose something, and we present that to them, what can we do to influence the conversion rate of new patients or even existing patients that say yes to the treatment we're proposing? So conversion rate having an impact on new patient phone inquiry or software inquiry, and then the conversion rate of actual treatment presentation itself.
Check. All right. So, Perrin, for our listeners out there, where can they find you, get in touch with you, and your work?
Yeah. So the name of the business is The Next Level Executive, and the website where you can find out a little bit more about me, the program, some of my podcast, thought leadership, and all that is thenextlevelexecutive.com. Thenextlevelexecutive.com. Like I say, I do have a podcast called The Next Level Executive. It's on all the major platforms, and you can find it on the website. And if you're interested in wondering or interested in building a group practice, I've got a document that for all my experience, I've outlined the top 20 mistakes that people make in building a group practice. I started out with 10 and realized that there were a lot more than that. So it's the top 20 mistakes that people make in building a group practice. It's good educational material, and you can find that directly at grouppractice.coach. grouppractice.coach, grouppractice.coach. It's a free download, and it's usually a pretty good document for people that are in the early stages of building a group or contemplating building a group and simply don't want to make the mistakes that everybody else has. I find that those mistakes are very predictable, and candidly, most of them are very avoidable if you know where to look. So hopefully that's helpful for your audience as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Perrin.
Don, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me on. Great to be with you again.
Absolutely. So if today's conversation resonated with you, visit insuranceuntangled.com/resources and download the episode guide for this episode. And if you're ready to start moving the numbers in your own practice, book that marketing strategy session using insuranceuntangled.com/MSM. I'll repeat that one last time, insuranceuntangled.com/MSM. Don't just listen to the episode, take action. That's where the real growth begins. Until next time, take care, everyone.